Don't worry about me. I'm going where I always wanted to go, and when I get there, I'll be saying a prayer for all of you.
As we enter this third week together as Kapaun's men, I can't help but be reminded of what it must have felt like in the prison camp. You're 2 months into this now. It's no longer new or interesting if it was at one point. It's actually the reality sets in that you're in for a long journey together. And what I would say to you is as we enter our third week, that's what we're entering as well. We talked about the virtue of forgiveness. Virtues are habits of goodness, and it is a habit that we as men develop, and those habits eventually are very attractive to our children, our spouses, our bosses, other church members, people in the community, and it begins to spread. This week I want to talk about another virtue that Father Kapaun showed us and modeled for us in his life. I was thinking a lot about this virtue this past week because I went to a restaurant and I got takeout. And as I got the takeout, I got in my car and I did the thing I did every single time I get takeout food. I checked to make sure that the people behind the counter got the order correct. Then I drove home and I talked to my children about the list of chores I'd left for them, but I didn't just listen to them tell me they'd done it. I went behind them and I checked to make sure they had done each thing I asked them to do. And then I got online and I checked my email. And I looked to make sure that all the things I'd asked to happen had been done by the people that I'd asked them to do. Basically, at the end of the day, I live a life where I don't have faith in anybody. Father Kapaun calls Kapaun's men to a deeper understanding of faith. An understanding of not only faith in your fellow man, but faith in a God who's bigger, more powerful, and loves us in such a way that we can live lives of true freedom. Because although Father Kapaun and the men were imprisoned in a prison camp, they were completely free because they worshiped a God bigger than walls in communist Korea. Listen as we begin to see that story unfold.
When they moved us back to Pyeongtaung, they'd reconditioned enough of the quarters there that their original plan to make that their major POW camp was then put into effect. And the officers' quarters was on top of this hill. On down below in the valley, were extending for about a quarter of a mile, was what used to be a village, but were the houses that the enlisted POWs were put in.
Dr. Essenston, one of the officers, told me, he said, every night Father Kapaun would gather us together. He said he would get us out of our huts, and he said we would, of course, grumble about it because it was so cold out. But he said he would gather the officers up, and he said he would make us stand out there, and he said then he would make us sing. We would sing God Save the Queen, we'd sing God Bless America, we'd sing the Lord's Prayer, and then we'd sing the Star-Spangled Banner. And he said he would make us do that because he said he wanted the enlisted men to know that we were still there. He said he made us sing as loud as we could so that they would know that they hadn't been abandoned. He said that wasn't the end of the night for Father Kapaun. He said all of us went back in our huts to get warm again, and he said Father Kapaun had a sweater on, and he said he pulled the neck of the sweater up over his face, and he said he had the sleeve of a sweatshirt that he would pull down as a cap. And he said then he would break into the enlisted men's compound. And he said he would go from hut to hut to check on the men.
He used to sneak from the officers' compound, come way down through all those guards and everything. And each one of them houses, he'd stop and pray with the guys and talk to them. And he got down to where we were. And I told him I was the guy he carried, and he said yes. And he talked to us and he prayed in there.
For those few moments that Father Kapaun would break into those huts, it would be transformed into a cathedral. They said the door would just open and he would slip in, and he said the first thing that he would do is that he would check to make sure that they were all right, to see if he needed to send a doctor down there the next day. If he had any food, he would share food with them. Before he was through, he'd ask us if we wanted to pray. A man named Robert Wood said, it didn't matter who you were. He said, of course everybody was going to pray with Father Kapaun. He said he had Protestants, he had Catholics, he had Muslims, he had atheists. He said every one of us was praying the rosary with Father Kapaun during those days because he had asked us to pray.
It was like you your spirits was lifted, like the burden was taken off in you. And here's a man that builds you up and everything. You believe in what he's saying. You understand it and you believe it. He thought of us guys as his boys. We were like a family to him. He wanted to make sure everyone was okay. Everything was all right with us. And he did his best to do that. That was I think his goal in life was to take care of us.
What he would always do before he left the hut is he was known to have this pipe, and he said he would take this pipe and he would light his pipe up.
And he passed that little half a pipe around, and he had some tobacco in his pocket. I don't know where he got it. And he'd pass the pipe around, everybody take a puff of the pipe. Then he'd look out the door, see if no guard was coming or anything. He'd slip on to the next building.
That was what Father Kapaun did through the night, and he said that so many times we just lived for those moments that he would come into our hut to give us that hope and to let us know that we were going to get out of there alive.
When you think of character, you think of loyalty, you think of love, you think of his commitment to our Lord, and willingness to share it in every way he could with those around him. I can't think of any more ideal person to model.
The soldiers reported that when Father came to them, there was a sense of peace. I think we need to capture that. There was a sense of peace. War is going on, and there was a sense of peace. Why? Because he had it. He had the peace in him, and he brought it wherever he went.
As far as I'm concerned, I think courage and faith are totally intertwined. Because if you don't have faith in what you believe and you don't have faith for what you are, you're never going to have the courage to stand up for what you need to stand up for. You know, it's always going to be that deal in the back of your mind that, no, I'm just not quite sure. You know, and whether it's faith in your Catholic belief or faith in any belief or faith in yourself, for me, it is totally entwined with courage, because you can't have one without the other. And I think that's how, you know, if I would look at Father Emil and they say how courageous he was, I think I would look at Father Emil and say how faithful he was.
That one moment does not make a saint. It's the fact that he was willing to do that day after day after day. For us, we might think that we go on a retreat and we give our life back into our faith and we're excited and we're good to go. Or we went to a men's group meeting for 12 weeks and we're good to go. No, it's day after day of deciding to pick up that cross and follow him.
In business interactions, I wasn't shy about who I was or who my family is and what my beliefs are and my Catholic upbringing, my Catholic education. It would always be a point of topic as you in conversations you get to know people. So those were dialogues and opportunities to share your faith and share what you're about, what you believe. And I saw way more times than not, people respond to that in a positive way. And they may have not been Christians, but the opportunity to talk about faith in a business context was one of the neatest things that I got to do over the last several years, was to share that.
This is the amazing thing about sharing our faith and sharing the good news, is that when we share it with somebody and they begin to participate in it, what does it do for my own faith? It explodes. So in this act of giving the joy, we never run out. This is why you can sit there and think, man, if I had to do what Father Kapaun did for 2 days, I'd just be exhausted, I'd be done, put a fork in me. But he never ran out, because joy doesn't run out. And in fact, when he gave it, he received more of it.
After I was captured, first place they took us was what we called Death Valley. When I first got there, all of the guys that was wounded like me, they had a 3-sided shed there. And this is November, it's really cold. And the ones that was wounded, like myself, they put in this building, had 3 sides, no front on it. It was right out to the weather. And the ones that lived through the night, then they took me and put me in a room where the rest of the guys was. It was warmer in there. But the other guys that died, they just left them, you know. And so while I was in this room, there was another soldier there. I forget what his name was, but he had a wound on his leg, and he had a T-shirt tying it up. And he had a Gideon Testament in there that the Army had given each one of us. And he pulled it out, was reading it, and I asked him if I could see it. Why, I don't know. So I took looking at it, and I flipped it over to the back page. On the back page is Plan of Salvation. And it told you just exactly what to do. So I prayed that prayer, give my heart and soul to the Lord Jesus Christ, and at that time I was saved. The burden that left me, you can't imagine. I stayed right with it until I got home, and I've been going to church ever since. And I figure I owe the Lord that much, best I can. And that's where I got saved, in prison camp.
I mentioned last week that I had a great experience of confession. I went to reconciliation, and I began to experience God's love and mercy for me in a way that I'd never had it before. From that became this explosion of faith, a faith that I began to understand when Jesus tells us in the Gospels things like faith to move mountains, faith to believe that God is bigger than anything we can imagine. And it goes further. Our family has a mantra. We say over and over again, expect miracles. And that's the kind of life we've attempted to live in a world that looks at us as men and as families and says, expect nothing, no miracle. Expect weakness, expect sadness, expect disappointment. And as Christian men, we are called to model that kind of faith. A faith that says that at the end of the day, God's got this. And so this week, the challenge for you as you leave here and go out into the world is before you leave today or maybe the next day or two, we want you to track down somebody in this group. Somebody that you can sit with between now and the next time that we get together, and you can share your faith journey. You can talk a little bit just about how you and God are. It's not meant to be a confession. It's more meant to be an accountability. This is where I'm at, and this is where I want to go. Someone to hear your journey, and someone that you trust, and someone that you love, and someone that's going to pray for you as you attempt to put this together. Well, secondly, with this person, we want you to talk a little bit just about how you're doing with the people around you. If you're married, how is your marriage? If you're single, how are you living into that vocation? But how is it that your faith is being lived out in the vocation that you have in this world? And finally, we're asking you to really look at the struggles that we have. And not so much for great detail, but more so that the person sitting next to you between now and this week can enter your journey in a way where they intercede for you. So many times we invite people into our journey so we can complain or whine or fuss about the world and what's wrong with the world and how somehow we're connected to that. Not Kapaun and not Kapaun's men. Kapaun men had faith that is unchangeable and unshakable, and Kapaun himself did. And so as we go into this journey, we look for a man in this group this week that we can share that faith with, and they can share their faith with us, and we can move forward into this deeper and deeper understanding of what it means to live as one of Kapaun's men. So know this week, I'll be praying for you. Father Kapaun himself will be praying for you, and lots of people in this group will be praying for you. Because to be a Kapaun's man means to go deeper in this journey of what it means to live a life of virtue. Ultimately, heroic virtue.